Protesters called it decontamination, scientists vandalism. For a few summers, pitched battles were fought in fields across England as opponents to genetic modification tried any approach to kill the crops and the research.
By the year 2042, our population is set to reach 9 billion. This puts increasing pressure on the world's resources and our ability to produce enough food to support the growing population. This documentary will explore the potential use of GM foods as a method to produce food in a higher quantity to meet future demands. GM crops are widely used in the US and Asia, but many Europeans are wary of their impact on health and wildlife. The only GM crop grown commercially in the EU is a type of maize called MON 810. This is modified to be resistant to the European corn borer. The USA has been cultivating GM maize since 1997, and Brazil, Egypt, Argentina, Canada, China and Paraguay began cultivating between 1997 and 2006. However, GM foods remain a contentious issue that has been known to cause public outrage and protests. Is this due to a lack of knowledge, media misrepresentations, or is GM not a suitable method to consider? So what is GM? GM food is produced from plants which have had their genetic makeup tweaked in a lab. Scientists cut and paste a gene from another organism into a plant to give it a new characteristic. Pro-GM scientists say that this means cheaper, more plentiful food, but opponents argue that we do not know the consequences of meddling with nature. Of Exeter's Grand Challenges Week, our team set out to interview members of the public, scientists and food producers on their views and opinions surrounding the GM food debate and how they felt about GM crops' potential to feed the world's growing population. We think this is important because it could help to guide policymakers in deciding whether or not to invest in genetically modified foods to combat population pressures.
I think I like my things to be natural, and I trust nature more than...
GM, it's the notion the Daily Mail inspired Frankenstein foods.
It's kind of been produced by people in order to keep the product big, like the fruit really large and not natural.
Well, in fact, an awful lot of genetic modification is no more than a speeding up of the natural genetic processes that would have occurred over many years. My personal feeling about this is that genetic modification in this form should in the first instance have been pioneered in its research by government, and the government should then have licensed it to big food organisations.
GM as a way of speeding up crop development, plant development if you like.
No, it's not natural, is it? It sounds good in theory, but then nothing ever really is.
Probably bad for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
For your body.
So I really do think that we should invest more in GM research, and my concerns are ecological, and I suppose associated with human health. I worry that some GM crops could escape into the environment and become the weeds of the future. But I think that if those risks are assessed well, then actually I have no fundamental problem with the idea.
I am very keen on expanding the thought of how we actually bring GM foods into this.
As a farm, I think we'd be quite interested in employing GM crops. However, I think our customers would be quite sceptical if they knew they were buying into GM. But I think this is more because there's a lack of knowledge surrounding GM. I think if they actually knew that it's not as scary as it sounds, then they probably would be happy.
Avoid as far as possible.
Standpoint is to provide what customers want, and at the moment customers don't want GM. I can see we might have to, because the population is getting so great, and we have to get out of the growing areas we have. What we can.
No, not really.
Depends. I think if it was the last resort, then definitely.
Well, I think the way the population's going, they'll have to do something, because it's just getting bigger and bigger, and something will change.
If there is a serious strain on the amount of food or the amount of land available per person, and GM is a valid solution to that problem and the risks are minimised, then I'm all in favour of it.
In a poll conducted at the Eden Project, 20 people were asked about their knowledge of GM foods. 15% believed they had a sound knowledge on GM, 25% felt they knew nothing at all, and 60% said they knew a little. Yet, when they were asked if they would buy GM foods if they were retailed cheaper than conventional foods, 65% said no, and only 35% said yes. We think this shows that there is a negative stigmatism attached to GM foods, where consumers wouldn't buy it regardless of having very little knowledge of the science behind it. When asked if GM could be a viable option to feed a growing population, 55% answered yes, 10% answered no, and 35% were unsure. We believe that these results show that this sample of the public agree that GM could be a potential to feed our growing population. However, there is a need for more public education surrounding the topic in order to alter some of the negative connotations surrounding it.
Delighted that you two are looking at this, because I think it's the likes of yourselves that we need to turn it around and find ways of selling GM to the public, because I'm 100% for it.